Okay, hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to Melanin and Moonlight. I am one of your hosts, Tyrell Collins.
And I'm the other, Vernon Scott. Hello, hello. How are you doing this beautiful Sunday, Tara?
I'm doing great. It was some really stormy weather over this past week, especially in the mornings, but sunshine now.
Love it.
So,
Yeah, I'm fortunate like over here. I think it's kind of cloudy now, but this weekend's been mostly hot.
yeah,
I on Friday when I got to my car because my best friend she got had her wedding on Friday and I was able to be there for her. Now that was exciting. But
yeah.
when I got into the car, it was 109 in there, and I was
Oh my
like,
goodness.
who's driving in that? What are we
Look,
doing?
is this a car or is this a coffin? Like,
Uh,
let me know.
Let me know. And it's still supposed to be spring. It is May 18th. We're still considered
Ooh,
spring. We're not even at where the heat is supposed to be hot, hot. So
right.
I'm already not a summer person, so I'm
Exactly.
definitely not looking forward to what this summer is going to bring because at this point, just throw it all away.
Exactly. I usually say during summer months, I try to be as pleasant as possible, knowing it's my worst season. So I just say that if you see me smiling really hard, just know that I'm really angry inside. Like,
Exactly. Like, don't come to me, don't talk to me. Like, I just don't want I barely want to be around people as is. And now I have to be around people. It's hot, muggy, and this is Georgia. Therefore,
hmm
we also have humidity. I don't got time for that. I
you know,
just let it be, let it be.
yep.
All right. So, speaking of hot things,
hmm
today's conversation is going to be related to the Diddy trial. So,
Yes.
for those who are
Mhm.
listening, I don't know how deep y'all are up to date on the situation. We're not necessarily going into the legalities of what is going on there, but there is conversations that have erupted as it
Mhm.
relates to the Diddy trial and some other things that happened this past week that we're going to really be diving into. But just for those who need to be caught up on what's going on with the Diddy trial, whatever. So Diddy is on trial for, well, let's specifically say what he's not on trial for and then what he is on trial for. He is not on trial for domestic violence, okay? So let so that will be clear for everybody because it is a part of what's happening, what we're going to be discussing today. But he is not on trial for domestic violence. He are sexual abuse, but he is on trial for sex trafficking and racketeering, RICO charges and whatnot. So as it relates to those things, the this week's testimony included a male sex worker as well as the artist Cassie. Um, Cassandra Ventura, I believe is her full name.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and in that, we get an understanding of what their relationship is like. So they brought up the situation from last year where there was a release of that tape of
Mhm.
Diddy physically abusing Cassie. Um, and let's say on Monday and Tuesday, I believe, the male sex worker, he was talking about that video because he was present in that, or it might have been the hotel worker, I forget. It was a lot of things going on, but I think there he did bring up instances where he witnessed Cassie being physically abused. So, and that was one of the things that was a turning point for him in how he engaged in the relationships, whether or not he was going to continue his participation in some of those freak offs that Diddy was having. And freak offs is the legitimate name of the events that Diddy was having, even though couple what whenever everything came out, we start hearing about the baby oil and all this other stuff. People's just like, why are things called freak offs? It came from Diddy's brain. He called it that. It is what it is. It's the type of thing that they got going on. All right. Now, within the testimony, when Cassie hit the stand, and she is one of the key witnesses for this trial, they brought back up the incident at the hotel, as well as her willingness and unwillingness to participate in some of those freak offs. They explored her relationship with Diddy, their romantic one, as well as an alleged sexual assault that she experienced by the hands of him. They explored the history of engagement with sex workers, paying sex workers and all of these other things. And they also really confirmed, at least for when Cassie was involved with the freak offs, that the baby oils were not laced with ketamine.
Mhm.
So that was interesting. But they also explored her drug use, her history with addiction, as well as they brought aspects of Diddy and his history with substance use and substance abuse and all that addiction and all the other great things. A lot has gone on through this week. Now, again, this conversation is not to discuss the legalities of whether or not Diddy did or did not. Um, I will say just from what I like, some things that's come up for me is whether or not they're proving sex trafficking
Mhm.
versus whether or not proven sex trafficking, because there is a legal terminology and that needs to be focused on and how that plays out, especially since this is a federal trial.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, this is outside of what we're talking about today, whether or not they're going to look at how a person's partner can be sex trafficked, even though there's no financial or value exchanged in those moments. But that's something beyond this.
Mhm.
Um, but anyways, the thing that I really wanted to focus on stems from public consumption of what's happening, because I've been seeing a lot of things on social media related to why Cassie decided to continue to go back to Diddy, as well as conversations about, oh, she said she was okay with it, so why are we saying that, acting like this is a crime? I've seen people mentioning things about um, how, what was it? Essentially, that because they were like in a long-term relationship, she knew what to expect in this relationship. It's kind of related to her going back to him. Like, how can you put up with being with him so long, and now that you're no longer with him, um, and the cash grab concept. They bringing up the fact that her show was canceled, her tour,
Mhm.
sorry, her tour was canceled, and all these other things. So I
Mhm.
wanted to focus on that because many people do not understand what the lived experience of people who have been in abusive situations, how that may impact the way that they think, the way that they behave, as well as how just because we have a cursory knowledge of what consent may look like does not mean that our own interpretation of a yes is the same interpretation of a victim of sexual abuse, domestic violence, and things of that nature. So before we even go deeper into that conversation, I wanted to ask you, Tyrell, like some of your understanding of what's been going on with this case, as well as um, see what kind of things that you may have been seeing on social media, if anything, this past week.
Yeah, no, I've definitely been following the case, not in, like every sense of the word, because of course this is going to be like a drawn out trial, and even,
Hmm.
the repercussions about what happens afterwards are still going to be drawn out. But yeah, I think it's very interesting to hear, I think, public opinion, but also get into the real again, legality of the situation. And again, we're not here to discuss like the actual legality of whether Diddy is
Mhm.
guilty, he's innocent, whatever. That's not, for us
We
to
are not
discuss.
lawyers.
But yeah, but when it does come to what the charges though are bringing up, I have listened to a few law experts who have been
Mhm.
saying that even with the nature of Cassie and other people, even other people's testimonies, of course, there are certain things that are going to be harder to prove in the nature of court. So, like, I remember I was watching one YouTube link and they were discussing about what is a very prevalent aspect that is going to be brought up is the nature of fraud. And so that really caught my ear because I was like, okay, fraud, where are they going with this? So they were saying specifically, prosecutors have charged him, of course, like you were saying, with sex trafficking by force of fraud, force or coercion. And we know that that carries like a very mandatory sentence. And so in this kind of case, I think that they're bringing up fraud as can be any type of like false promises, manipulation, misrepresentation, anything like that. And so in this case, it's in addition to the in addition to the trafficking aspect, if there's any type of financial misconduct that has been done, deceptive practices, all of these things can get tacked into like this larger umbrella of how we see fraud. So I'm not saying that this is true of what they said. I'm just trying to think of it as a loose, as not loose, but aspect in my head, how it has been known that Cassie has brought up that okay, there were certain aspects musically that she was promised
Mhm.
in relation to this whole ongoing aspect with Diddy and the record company. And I think what legal experts are trying to say, if they can prove without a shadow of a doubt that from financials, from deceptive practice techniques and things like that, if they can prove that in court, then yes, they have a very strong case for fraud. And again, we're not here to discuss whether or not that works or it won't work. That's just what it is. But
Mm.
yeah, I do think that in this kind of case, though, the lines of what consent and coercion actually, uh, can mean, is very. I'm not gonna say it's blurred, but it's very interesting to dissect, especially as we hear about what, of course, like the prosecution has made, Cassie, reveal in text messages on the stand. So I do think that it's an interesting conversation to have, and I'm glad that we're
Mhm.
having.
And a part of why I'm so happy that we're talking about this, especially now, before anything has come out about, because it is an 8-week trial. So that literally we can have this conversation at any time throughout the course of everything, even after the fact. But
Mhm.
the reason why I feel like it's important to have it now is because oftentimes whenever there's a situation where there's been accusations and a person gets off, or a person does not be convicted of the crime, people overlook the harm that was actually done, right?
Mhm.
They see, oh, this person is, they didn't get convicted, therefore that means they didn't do this, that means that person was a liar and all of that. But what they tend to forget is that there was actual things that happened to this person that they were victim of in the process of exploring the legalities of everything, whether we can convict on this specific charge, because Cassie's statute of limitations for the other things has already, gone by. So of course he cannot be tried for the any kind of domestic violence that she may have experienced or even the sexual assault that she may have experienced. That's why she had a civil case and not a criminal case, right?
Right.
And people think that, oh, because this person did not get convicted for that, then that means they're completely innocent. That's
Mhm.
not always the case, right? Um, though Diddy may um actually not go to jail as a result of this case, because if they don't prove sex trafficking, if they don't prove racketeering, cool or whatever. I'm not saying it's really cool, but all right, that happens,
Mhm.
but that doesn't remove the harm that he's caused onto other people, which includes the sex workers who were involved in this, the partners that were involved in this, especially Cassie, Dawn, who will be the person speaking on Monday, and any other persons who were within Diddy's orbit that had potentially suffered from any kind of abuse of power that may be within that orbit of Diddy, right? So,
Right. And and you see, that's the thing, because I think under, I'm not gonna say under other circumstances, but I think if that video had not come out last year, where we, like, it is very clear as day, he is beating her.
mhm,
Like, I mean, there is just no rhyme or thing about it. You can't even say like it's a misinterpretation aspect, like how when the whole video came out, I remember like years ago with the whole like Jay-Z and Solange thing, where like, okay, where we have a bit of fighting, or if we want to think about like the Rihanna and Chris Brown situation, where it's like, okay, yeah, he shouldn't have put his hands on her, but like, do we hold Rihanna accountable for actually kind of egging situation on, or however we want to interpret those situations. This was a very clear video of him dragging this woman, kicking her, beating her not resisting or fighting. So when we talk about the nature, I think, of consent, versus like coercion, we also have to understand that consent under duress is not real consent. Right.
mhm,
So, as it's been brought up, Cassie may have technically agreed to these sexual acts that was involved in these freak offs. Obviously, we know that there was drug use involved. There was filming that was involved. And yes, she makes it clear. Again, we're not here to argue about whether or not we believe her or not, whether we believe Diddy or not. But she has argued that and made it clear that she agreed out of fear. And
mhm,
anytime you have fear out of violence, emotional attack, retaliation, abandonment, blackmail, whatever it is, you know, you may have been saying yes in that moment because that is where that fear is coming in, but also understanding that consent, again, consent under duress is not real consent.
mhm. Yeah, and something else, she mentioned how her career was tied to his comfort.
Mhm.
Like if he's not happy, she may not be able to have as many opportunities as she wants. She even mentioned that she continued to record songs all these years. Like she mentioned, I think she said that she has 9 albums worth of songs, except that those songs were not released. And part of them not being released is on her what was his title for her at the time? I know he owned the record company, but anyways, it was contingent on whether or not Diddy would want to release those albums or not. So she's not getting any new albums out because the person that she's engaging with is not releasing them. So in order for her to she even mentioned that for her to go to this well, she felt as though in order for her to go to this premiere that she really wanted to go to, or I think it might have been an audition. I forget the exact thing that she was planning on attending, but it was something that would help her in her career. She decided that, oh, Diddy's reaching out to me. He's clearly trying to get set up a freak off. So I'm going to do this in order for him to have a calm head, and hopefully this thing is done before I go to this event that I really want to go to. That's not an an enthusiastic, yes, let me go ahead and participate in this. This is a well thought out plan of how can I do this thing to
Mhm.
appease this other person in order for me to have the freedom to do the thing that I want.
Exactly.
That is coerciveness, right? That is something that is not a freely given yes to participate.
Yeah.
There's some stipulations to that. If she chose not to participate in that potential, that specific freak off, well, what does that mean for her to have said no?
Hmm.
Like, will there been backlash? We already have proof through the video that there was physical violence present. So if there was
Hmm.
a no, does that mean that she is to the mindset of the abuser, given permission for them to act irrationally, to abuse in order to get the thing that they want? Like,
Hmm.
we have to really consider what that lack of a yes means for the person who does not have that power.
Hmm. Right.
Right. And for those people who even asked the question of, oh, she seemed as though she was so down for all this kind of freaky activity. And she admitted at first, yes, she was very much so open to it. But after time went on, after
Mm-hmm.
she realized that he was seeing her as a plaything and not a partner, she did not want to continue to do those things. She wanted to be in a monogamous relationship with this man, and he wanted the freak offs, and
Right.
she did the freak offs in order to please him. Right now, we're looking at a new dynamic. Okay, I want this person to be my man. They said I have to do this thing in order for them to be happy. And if I do that thing, maybe one day we'll get to a point where we do not have to do this at all. So I'm going to play the long game and hope that he changes. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Many
And that's
people.
the thing. Yeah, and that's the thing. When we talk about that, we talk a lot about what does it mean to victim blame, because if when we think about this case, it is to say, okay, the defense is going to like come at her hard. Of course, we have these text messages. We know like the arguments that are going to be brought up. She stayed for years. She sends like the flirty messages and things like that. So it's kind of like saying like she's compliant in it.
Hmm.
And what is so dangerous about that narrative, not I think just from a legalistic standpoint, because again, a prosecution has a job to do, or a defense has a job to do.
Hmm.
um so I don't really even get into like, oh, the tactics necessarily, the legal tactics that a defense would go at Cassie for, or like a prosecution will go at Diddy for. They're doing their jobs and they're going to do it however best they can see fit. But it is, I think, important to know for a defense in trying to come at Cassie, in saying that, well, we have all these messages and things like that to suggest that this is, compliance. Compliance, though, is not the same as consent.
Hmm.
When you are in when people are in situations, they may be smiling while hiding pain. And that doesn't mean that they're safe. It means that they're surviving
Hmm.
in this particular in any type of circumstance. So, take any of us. We can be in any type of situation where it's like, yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to say this, but does that mean that I'm really enthusiastically consenting to it? No. And like you
Hmm.
just brought up, yeah, even if she was down for whatever at the time, if for in it, if at any point, this was pushing the boundaries of her comfort level, or if there was something more that she was wanting, like you say, out of a monogamous, type of fashion, or whatever it is, it could have been the smallest thing. At that point, it changes the dynamic. So it doesn't even really matter if she, was fully involved and fully consented, or was enthusiastically consented, and agreed to quote unquote the freak offs, one or two times or whatever it is. If at that third time she had a boundary where she said no, then that's all that matters since then.
Hmm.
You know, but again, people have their jobs to do.
Yeah, and speaking of jobs, I think because when people act as though these dynamics do not correlate with other avenues of our lives,
Mhm.
right? And a part of one of the things that I loved about the research that I did was peeling the onion backwards more and more and more to really expose the different layers in which we may see different aspects of rape culture and all of that. So
Mm,
it's not just focusing on how this may look in this room, but how it can look in each individual rooms that we step in.
mm,
And if people really think about the dynamics that they have with on the job, they will start to really understand what Cassie is going through if they give themselves the chance to actually open their eyes
mm,
to really empathize with her in that level. And I know for some people they may want to block that aspect because they may have experienced something similar, but
mm,
not exactly the same as Cassie in like their romantic relationships, where if they see her victimhood, if they see her pain, it means that they may have to acknowledge their own, which may mean that they themselves become a victim, and that's in and of itself is a hard truth for them to swallow. And I get that sense, but we
mm,
do have to really think about, oh, if my CEO came to me and we started to engage in a relationship and they asked me to do something that I'm okay with doing at first, but then I get tired of doing that thing, how much long will it take? Well, how long would it take for me to start thinking about, oh, wait, if I start to say no to this, will I still have my job?
mm,
Will I still be able to make sure that I have enough money to save for a house, have enough money to go to Disney, have enough money to go home for this upcoming holiday? Do I have enough um, excess funds to make sure that I'll be okay while I go on the job search?
mm,
Like there's weight to a lot of the decisions that Cassie had to face.
mm,
That's the reality of her circumstances, regardless of what she did consider to consent to at the earlier parts of it. And we have to remember she was like 19, so she doesn't have
mm,
the experience that a 30-year-old will have about, oh no, you don't do that. You don't sleep with your bosses. You don't sleep with your CEO. You don't sleep with anyone who it has power over your paychecks, right?
mm.
She doesn't have that knowledge because she is a very young person, or even if somebody may have told her that, she's still young enough in that circumstance, young enough to be in a state of disbelief because she hasn't had that experience yet to prove why I
Exactly.
shouldn't do that.
Exactly. And one of the constant questions that gets put online when people are questioning, well, I mean, if all of this was happening, like why didn't she just go to the police or she should have just told law enforcement or whatever. And what people really I think fail to understand is that when you are dealing with somebody who is a mogul or even anybody just in general who is in positions of power, it's a very multi-layered aspect, and it doesn't just come from a personal aspect of you just may not trust police, but think about number one, the fear of retaliation, right? you know she has testified that, and we have seen him physically beat her. Like, we have, I'm pretty sure that there were stalking elements. There have been
Mhm.
threats to release explicit videos to destroy her career. So going to the police, one could have put her life, her safety, and livelihood at greater risk. Because what people don't sometimes they fail to understand is that when someone controls your life, your money, your image, reporting them feels almost like how we say poking the bear, right? And it's poking the bear with no escape plan.
Mhm.
So it's like, okay, I can report this, yeah, sure, but what happens to me? And like you just said, Cassie met Diddy when she was 19. You know, he's a world famous mogul, right? So, of course, there are certain things that he provides opportunities. He provides
Mhm.
visibility, shelter, financial aspects, emotional aspects. I mean, it is so easy to, I'm just going to throw this term out there and hope I'm using it in the right context. It's so easy because I think the nature of trauma bonding is very trauma bonding for me, in my personal interpretation, it doesn't necessarily always have to mean you're bonding from actual traumatic aspects of life.
Mhm.
For me, it's more so of like, even if you're coming together as two people who have survived something, so that you see things more clearly. And of course, I mean, if we're moving into the nature of how Diddy amassed his life and things like that, it's not to say like, oh my God, like he has like the most traumatic past or anything like that.
Mhm.
But you can see obviously why somebody would bond with him in that way. So,
Mhm.
when we add that, and then we also, of course, we always have to throw in obviously conversations about race and ethnicity, right? Especially for Black women and women of color who are
Mhm.
connected to powerful men. The justice system is not a refuge. It has never been a refuge for women, for women
That
of color.
part.
So if we have all of those aspects toppled on the nature of being a woman of color. And so it's like when we look at the power of public perception here, it's like, all right, Diddy has the wealth and the legal team, the media control, the industry influence. Hell, he was given a key to the city. Me, hello.
Yeah.
Then you think about what Cassie has. She might have asked herself, all right, one, who's gonna believe me over him?
Mhm.
What if he ruins my reputation by leaking those tapes?
Mhm.
Will the media say I knew what I signed up for? Right. So when we talk about the climate in which this is taking place, in which things like this have always been astute, it's like coercion doesn't just come through threats.
Mhm.
It comes through the silence that our culture and overall society demands of survivors.
Mhm.
So it's like, okay, she files this lawsuit in, of course, 2023, breaking that silence after more than a decade. And we should really be focused on like the courage that it took to speak publicly against someone like him.
Right.
Regardless about whether or not you like her, don't like her, believe her, don't believe her, how often I mean, yes, we can make a parallel to the whole Harvey Weinstein aspect of it and, things like that. But survivors come forward when they feel safe, they feel supported, and they feel ready.
Mhm.
I've always said, if whenever you're in any type of situation, you have to be in a place where you are willing to lose everything to fight for what is right. you know
Yes.
so yeah, I just, when it comes to the whole things about why didn't she say something sooner, why didn't she go to police, it's like, hello, alarm bells, wake up calls.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's important to really focus on the aspect of ooh, ADHD, don't do this to me. But to really focus on the thought process of like what it means for her to have stepped out against Diddy. Because that part in itself is not really discussed as much because, like you mentioned, most survivors, most victims, they do not come out until they feel safe and ready to do so. And this is a person who has spoken out on the abuse that she experienced, called out a person that she knows has the capability of causing harm to her,
Mhm.
a person that she knows has a lot more wealth than she has access to. Like, yeah, she may have gotten to $20 million in that settlement, but that's a drop in the bucket for a person like Diddy. He
Mhm.
has the money to send. He has the money to spare. So to pay that off, that was nothing. And even she said if she had the ability to get her agency back, she would give all that money away, right? Like the power and influence that this man has and the courage that it takes for her to name that one right there
Mhm.
did things to me.
Yeah.
is a very courageous act. And I need
Mhm.
people, I would want for people to really understand how much courage that is for her to really do that. And on top of that, knowing that the community that we all share, be it with Diddy as well as with her, the black community, just to have that sense of community, to know that this person who many black people listen to his music, enjoy his career, his success, his clothing, and all that, now have to shift their potential perspective and know that there's going to be backlash because we don't want our heroes to be to look bad. We don't want the person that brought us so much greatness to look bad, to be the person to name them as a person who has harmed them and be willing to take on that critique, to be called out of their name just
Mhm.
for speaking their truth. That is courage. Like just to be able to speak on that. And of course, because I know people love to bring up the idea of, that person can be lying. Okay, yeah, people do lie, but that video did not. That video did enough. And personally, I didn't need a video to be open to the idea that Cassie may be correct here, that she may have been abused by him in some way. I didn't
Yeah.
need the visual proof. The visual proof makes it more real, but I didn't need that.
Yeah, and most time, and a lot of times, I mean, yes, because we know that people can, when you are a mogul or you're a CEO or somebody in positions of power, people can, try to exploit you, take advantage
Hmm.
of the power of your position to make a name for themselves and, things like that. But more than not, people, just like Cassie in this situation, don't choose coercion, they endure it.
Hmm.
So it is one of those things that by speaking out, she's helping others, to also name what typically hides in plain sight. And I think from the nature of her testimony this week, and I think others that are going to come, we really have to continue having conversations about power. Power
Hmm.
can be silenced. You can feel, you can be the most talented person ever on the entire planet and still be silenced. We have to continue having conversations about fear being a type of imprisonment,
Hmm.
because I am scared of what will happen to me and my livelihood, or even others that are attached to me or connected to me. And then ultimately continue having conversations about the fact that survival is never simple.
Hmm.
Survival is never a linear type of process. So just because I have endured something, that is meaning that yes, I have survived it, and now I don't even necessarily, you may not even necessarily know what the healing from that looks like. you know because it's always going to be a part of your story. It doesn't necessarily need to overrun your entire life. It's not the sum of who you are, of course, but it has a very dented aspect on your heart and in your life when you go through
Hmm.
something like this.
Yes, exactly.
So,
Um, so even to further the conversation of consent a little bit more, I do want to touch base on the kink side of things, because just typically speaking, if someone approached with the concept of a freak off or anything like that, and they just say they've been going to these kind of events, I will say absolutely nothing about that, because you adult, you do your things, all consenting adults having fun, great, love it for y'all, engage. Is beautiful, right? Now, the thing with this trial that really came out and stayed with me, because I have to stay in the kink friendly mindset, as well as understanding the dynamics of consent. And for anybody who don't know this, consent is my thing, y'all. But so it doesn't become a violation until the person who's engaging in this becomes uncomfortable and they're made to continue. That is when we're crossing the line of their consent. And then there's also the power dynamics here that are at play, which further extends that violation forward. For those people who may be completely unfamiliar with the dynamics of BDSM or any kind of kink play, yes, there are spaces for DOMs, there are spaces for subs and how that dynamic work. But any person who's approaching the sub DOM relationship in a kink friendly and informed way, recognize where the power really lies. The power lies in in the hands of the person who is either receiving the torture, receiving the pleasure, receiving the acts, meaning if we go with Dom sub, the power is in the hands of the sub, right? Meaning they control the atmosphere of how this play engage. It is up to the Dom. Yes, they getting their own pleasure out of the things, but it's up to the Dom to ensure that the sub is feeling safe throughout their play. And um, the freak offs from what the videos and commentary that I've listened to and whatnot mostly spoke of Diddy as playing the role of a voyeur. So then you have the other party. In this case, will be the exhibitionists, right? They are the ones who are engaging in the play for the pleasure of the person who's watching. The voyeur, because some people think, oh, this person's not engaged. How will they have the power? They're not supposed to. The power is in the hands of those who are at play in the exhibition side. Because if you think about it, if you're an exhibitionist or if you're a person who's into public play and you're enjoying what you're doing and you want people to come and watch, anytime a person steps outside of the boundaries that you set in terms of how you get to engage and watch, they're violating that play. Meaning, if you're like, you can watch, but I don't want anybody to bring out their penis or play with their vulvas or anything like that. As soon as you start doing that, you have to go. And if somebody decides to do that, they're in violation of the kink play, right? However, when it came to these freak offs, not to say that you cannot role play and participate in that manner, but when it came to these, everything was in the hands of the voyeur. He's the one who's making the decisions. He's the one who's ensuring that, and I'm using he because I'm talking about Diddy, okay? Uh, he is the one who is ensuring that everything goes according to his fantasies for how things are being done. Now, yeah, you can have that type of play, but that's where the negotiation comes in. Like, okay, you want us to put on oils at your wish. You want us to do these things, and that things according to how you want it. Cool, we can do that, but here's the boundary. Once you go beyond that, that's when we can't do that. And the fact that these things went on for 36 to 4 days, sorry, 36 hours to 4 days. There's drugs involved. There's so many things related to what's going on in these freak offs. It's just so many
Yeah,
violations that just
exactly. And that's
it's too
why
much.
when you brought up this, that's why I was saying to myself, I'm like, yeah, we're not even getting into the nature of like, consent and kink as like, of course, not in a healthy dynamic, but even the nature of just trying to move into the kink. So I want to preface by saying for any of our, listeners that are not familiar, with the kink, kind of aspect that kink obviously, as you even preface, it are, pretty much sexual practices that typically deviate from what is traditionally considered vanilla. So when we talk about BDSM or role play, domination, submission, as you brought up exhibitionism, which is kind of like what these freak offs were. You know, healthy kink contexts, of course, are activities that are negotiated in advance, right? There's clear boundaries, safe words that are established. consent is always an ongoing and enthusiastic thing. And we always make sure we have aftercare, right? And emotional safety. That's kind of like sums up, and that's a very broad context, but that sums up like some very important aspects of a healthy kink dynamic. To me, what is going on in this testimony, again, we're not here to argue about whether or not, you personally believe Cassie or not, but in Cassie's testimony, it's like consent is eroded by power, right? So
Mhm.
it's forced participation in these freak offs. Like you may mention, like during her testimony, it's drugs, surveillance, threats to ensure submission, filming without consent, then using those tapes as leverage, right? So it's created a dynamic where saying no is really not an option, where your career, again, your housing, your finances, and all these things are tied to, approval. And so these actions in itself very much violate the very ethics of kink, which, obviously, as we say, relies essentially as a foundation and a basis on consent and mutual, this kind of mutual empowerment for all parties involved. So
Mhm.
to me, what I think about this when I hear about these aspects of these freak offs, it's like it's coercion wearing a I want to say it's kind of like coercion wearing a kink mask.
Mm.
That's what I
Yeah.
really think about it as, because there is, from at least if we're going off of what Cassie's testimony shows, there is no negotiation of terms. There's no emotional safety. There is no way out of way out of without retaliation. There's no ability to revoke consent without severe consequences. And
Mhm.
essentially, and what I would hope our audience, who has always been listening to us, and things like that, understand is that kink without choice isn't kink, it's control.
Mm. A
Kink
word.
without punishment for saying no is sexual abuse. Let's not conflate those two.
Right.
So yeah, and this public kind of misconception about, again, as we talked about earlier with the whole, like, why did she just call police, or if we want to bring up the nature of, well, she agreed to it, so isn't it just considered freaky, not abuse, right? But again, that's a dangerous line of thinking. It confuses compliance with consent. It
Right.
assumes initial agreement means perpetual agreement, right? It's weaponizing what we could see as kink culture. Like you said, hey, if we think about the nature of just a freak off party, I mean, that's very common.
Mhm.
People have freak off parties all the time, like whatever that consists of.
Just less
But
baby oil.
yeah, exactly. But let's not weaponize kink culture as a shield for abusive behavior. So,
Mhm.
like we said in the beginning, even if Cassie once agreed to a certain dynamic, that consent can always be withdrawn. The very moment any type of threats, blackmail, drugs, it's not kink anymore. It's exploitation.
Right.
you know
And I,
so let's not, so I get hot about that, because I'm like, let's not demonize, or let's not throw the nature of, like, oh well, it's just this or it's just that, like, so yeah, it's just kinky. Like,
mhm.
no, that's not what that is.
And I want to jump back to what you brought up when you said coercion masked as kink.
Oh yeah.
Because there was that sex worker who's already testified
Mm,
on the stand, and he mentioned how he was very comfortable going to
mm,
these parties, having fun. Cassie seemed as though she was having fun, and the way that a lot of things were set up was that Cassie would be the person to find the guy, the illusion of choice, if we want
mm,
to look at it in the lens of, coercion, meaning you get to decide who gets to fuck you, but you know you're getting fucked. I'm sorry, y'all.
mm,
The filter went out. Uh, but you get to decide who's going to do this, right?
mm,
Um, but at the end of the day, you're still going to be engaging with somebody in the way I want you to engage with them, right? So she would. find the guy. She would then be the person to give them the money and all of that. And she even mentioned like the money that she was given to her to give to them, right? So a lot of this for a person who doesn't know the behind the scenes dynamics, would think, oh, all of this is a very willing participation, right? This
Yeah.
person is engaging with me. They're the ones setting the stuff up. They mentioned that, oh yeah, this you already know who that is. They're just going to be here to watch, and they're going to give us some cues every now and again, but it's all going to be you and I. It's just going to be us having a good time. So if you're comfortable, I'm comfortable, let's go ahead and make this happen. So you can
Hmm.
present things very consensually to a
Hmm.
person who does not know the true dynamics of what's happening outside of what they're experiencing. And so like whenever it comes to these kinds of testimonies, this is why it's important for us to really
Hmm.
unpack all aspects of things, because if you
Yeah.
only get the testimony from the sex worker who at one point said he just decided that it was not, he wasn't rocking with it, as soon as there
Hmm.
was some non-consensual things happening, some physical abuse, he was like no, right? He'll check up on her,
Hmm.
make sure she's good, but before then, oh yeah, we're just having a good time. Like there's
Yeah.
nothing here. So we have to, like, if we only had that, people will think, "Oh yeah, there was no kinds of sexual abuse." Because to
Yeah.
that person at that moment, that didn't exist.
Right. And I think that this is a prime case that, teaches us about, like, in legal and ethical terms, right? Under law, consent is invalid if it's obtained through force, fraud, or coercion,
Hmm.
which, according to Cassie, describes all the things that happen vividly. But what I think it teaches us about kink and the nature of violation is that, again, consent has to be something that's enthusiastic, it's ongoing, it's also revocable.
Hmm.
It's not assumed. And we can't use kink culture as a justification for abuse, and nor can we allow the fact that power and fear, as this kind of warped aspect that, oh, it makes consent, possible. No, power and fear make true consent impossible, you know. And so the presence of pleasure in any realm doesn't negate the presence of harm. So kink in it at the end of the day isn't about dominance of someone's humanity. It's about playing safely with control, not actually erasing somebody's ability to choose. You know. So in this kind of case, I think that it's a very interesting case. And I'm hoping, for as horrible as these things and these situations are, I am hoping that it pushes uh us, other, educators in all different realms, other people in all different realms, to have these kind of conversations, to have these kind of conversations, what, to say like, no, this isn't kink. This is something that has gone too far. You know,
Hmm.
we have to have conversations about, no, this is abuse cloaked in kink aesthetics. This is coercion packaged as consent, you know. So that's what I'm ultimately hoping, again, regardless about what happens with the case, of course, I am hoping that justice is done. However, I think what this proves is, how much more, we have to continue having, these discussions, and what sort of discussions should we be having, because it's just not the I wouldn't say the foundation, but like a lot of times when people are having these kind of conversations, it's very cookie cutter,
Hmm.
you know. And the thing is that I've always been a person who believes that multiple things can be true at the same time, but
Hmm.
it doesn't make it so there's a justification for it, you
Yeah.
know. So
And I want to go back to how started off this conversation about, what the charges are, and also to bring back up the idea of it does not, regardless of what that person's charges are, be it if they are convicted of that charge or not, we cannot erase the pain that was caused on the person who was a victim of their crime, right? And I mention that because with all of what's going on with this Diddy trial, somehow Tory Lanez decided to bring his freaking behind up to the conversation. And granted, it wasn't, I hope it wasn't something that was planned. But at the end of the day, he was stabbed. And he was a victim, from my understanding, of someone else's attack, which is not okay. Like what he's in jail for, that action in itself definitely was not okay. Um, but because of this incident, people are bringing back up the trial that brought Tory Lanez into prison. And they're talking about how Meg lied and all this other stuff again. There's this random situation about whatever her what's her Kelsey, I think, ex-friend's name was, how her bodyguard, who wasn't there that night, overheard conversations about, oh, it was Kelsey who shot Meg and all this other stuff. And I'm like, okay, people, this has been through the trial. That thought also came up in the trial, and that in itself was dismissed and everything, okay? And that even if you decide to look at what Tory Lanez was charged for, he wasn't necessarily convicted for shooting Meg. Technically, in a way, if we look at the language, that's something that's related, but the charges were assault with a semi-automatic firearm, possession of an unregistered loaded firearm in a vehicle, and discharging a firearm with gross negligence. There's no attempted murder. There's nothing about him potentially causing harm on Meg as an individual. There's no personal charges being made. These were charges made from the state. It's felony charges, but they were not Meg's doing. She did not press these charges. The state did, and they had her come in as a witness. All right. She did not press these charges, people. I need y'all to remember that. It was proven she was shot in the foot. Somebody shot her in the foot. Whoever it was, who knows?
Mhm.
Y'all want to say it was Kelsey? Okay, Kelsey shot her in the foot. Cool. The court said it was Tory. Okay, cool. At the end of the day, she was shot in the foot. She's the victim. She had pain. Why are we blaming her for the pain that she experienced when she was not the person that caused the pain to happen? That's not her. That is nothing that she has to do with it. But guess what? Even if Tory Lanez did not shoot her, it was a gun that was in his vehicle and it was fired. The bullets came from that gun. So if we're going to charge Kelsey, cool, charge her for the actual shooting. But guess what? Those charges on Tory will stick. So he will still be in jail, people. He will still be in jail. Because one, he was on parole, I believe. Or yeah, he could not have a firearm at all. But here we are. This is one of those situations. If you know that you are on parole, if you know that you are supposed to be on house arrest or whatever the case may be, if you know there are certain terms, certain things that you cannot participate in, this is when you don't bring those people who participate in those things in your environment. Because guess what? Popos pull up, those things are in your environment, they're still going to charge you. Because how dare you put yourself in this situation to be around these um this paraphernalia that we told you not to be around, right? of course, in this situation, that person may be completely innocent. They didn't bring the things with them, but the law does not care about the truth sometimes. The law does not care about whether or not you invited that person over. The law knows I told you not to be around that thing. You were around that thing. I'm putting your behind back in behind bars. It's just how it works, unfortunately. It's just how it works. So
Sure.
stop bringing up this case to blame Meg because she did not harm herself for one. Two, the man would still be in jail regardless for having the gun.
Mhm.
That's not on her. She didn't bring the gun with her. She didn't bring the gun into the car.
Yeah.
So can we ask how did we get a gun in the car? It might have been the security officer's gun. So you gonna
Again,
have
accountability.
like what are we doing here? And if
Yeah.
your security guard is okay with you shooting women, that's just another thing. I'm not even going into that. So yeah, have you been hearing anything about the Tory Lanez situation?
Yeah, no, I mean, you pretty much summed up all of, my feelings about the whole aspect. Now, of course, like I did, of course, in the what's been in recent news is about, of course, the stabbing, you know,
Hmm.
um, which, I know that there's a lot of moral debates going on online about like, oh my God, like, is he getting what he deserves? And all that type stuff, which, that's a very philosophical debate. I mean, you know, I don't believe that, prison to me doesn't equal safety, even for the guilty.
That that part.
Um, and again, I can think that multiple things can be true. I think that he needs to be held accountable for what he has done, for what he has done to Meg, for sure. But, that doesn't mean that he deserves to be stabbed, maimed, or killed in prison either, you know.
All right.
And philosophically, for me, I mean, I've always thought that, yes, justice should not be about vengeance. It's about boundaries, it's about accountability and human dignity. But for me, justice has also been a very flawed concept that comes down to a jury of people who have their own biases in the world about what they consider to be just. So I don't know. That's just me. Um, but yes, I never want to see anybody, stabbed or killed or like been
Hmm.
attacked brutally in any type of way. Um, so yeah, I just know that that's a conversation that happening online.
Hmm.
But again, just to echo, like I echo, pretty much everything that you said about
Yeah.
one thing not having to do with these.
Like people will
'Cause I
find a way to hate on that woman, hate on any black woman just for the chance to just be like, I'm on the side of what?
Mhm,
Whiteness? What side are you trying to be on? You're not on the side of
mhm.
justice. You're not on the side of protecting all black women. Like what side are you trying to be on? You're not on the side of protecting black people in general, because black women are black
Yeah.
people. So
You know what? It's kind of like one of my favorite rappers of all time, Nas. He has it in one of his lyrics from one of his more recent albums, one of his songs called The Bible. He has a lyric that says, "Stay out of black women business unless you vested in it." So listen, if you're not going to, I'm not saying that you need to be some crusader, or some ultra, figure where you feel like you need to protect, black women or anybody for that matter. So my
mhm.
thing is like, for any group of people, it's kind of like if you're not going to be vested in the interests, don't speak on it.
Mm, amen.
you know.
Amen. Okay. What, we're a little bit over time. But do you still want to go into the Halle Bailey situation? Because I know that can be a quick rant for me, but I just want to,
Or we can get more into it if we want to save it for next time.
hey, let's save it for next time. That
Okay,
way we
we'll do
can
it at the top
have
of our
more
top of the show.
things. Because
All
I know I promised to talk about DJ Academics like 3 months ago. And I think I could tie in that mofo into that conversation. So
Oh, we
we
definitely
can
can.
do
Look,
that.
y'all know we be tying things in. You know how
Listen,
we do.
because honestly, academics could have been tied into this conversation because the allegations is there. But besides the point, not doing that today. Um, but yeah, we'll do that because I know I promised the anti-intellectualism conversation this week, which would have been a rant, but that can wait another day as well. This was a little bit more of a pressing situation. So awesome. All right, Tyrell. So, anything else that you would like to share with the audience before close things out?
No, I think that we covered a good bit. Yeah, I just think that as more of the conversation, unfolds around, the whole Diddy trial situation. Again, let's just keep having, important conversations. Let's keep pushing those conversations and pushing narrative.
Yes, yes. Whew. Well, you all, thank y'all so much for tuning in to Melanin and Moonlight, your late night space for deep, thought-provoking conversations about sex culture and the well-being of the Black community. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast to keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep the vibes flowing and your minds open. Bye, y'all.
Bye.